Um, all right. Well, hey, I know Jeremy will probably be joining us here in a little bit, but wanted to start off with I brought Peter in partly for the reason that one of the thought that we have behind this is that we want to begin by doing the training with all the managers, and then in turn we're going to go like one by one and do it with all the teams. So that way you get a sense of what this whole process is about before we actually take your teams through it. And it's going to be a 3-week process. And the first 2 weeks are just basically laying the groundwork, really talking about the ins and outs of what the CVI is. And then the third week is actually one of the one that I'm most excited about, which is we're actually going to have all of you guys fill out a CVI bio. And then we're actually going to go through together and talk about it and kind of share with each other. That'll be the chance that we all get to know each other on a pretty intimate level, if you will, from a CVI standpoint. And I wanted to bring Peter in here because we actually took his team through this, the media buyers. And Peter, we'd just love to hear from you, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, did you find this beneficial for your team, and if so, how?
Yeah, I think that taking the whole team through the CVI training really changed how we approach things. So there are a lot of different CVIs with the media buying, people who approach things wildly different direction. And prior, we had kind of a one-size-fits-all assumption about media buyers. What drives media buyers? What parts of this job do you like? And some of that is because maybe Blake and I are pretty similar on it, and so we have like some of the same base assumptions, but it turns out that's not anywhere close to reality. And so as a manager, it's changed the situations that I put my team into. Maybe I know that somebody is motivated by one thing versus the other, or I know that Ben likes to talk to people, and Blake likes to direct him, get out, doesn't want to waste time on fun if you don't need to. And so maybe I spend more time with Ben and talk him through where I was like, up this message to get in and get out. So I think it affects how you manage your team, kind of the way that you communicate with them, the way that you work with them, and the way that everything works together. And so I think that's really helpful with our group because we all work together, but how much do we actually know about like, the right way that we should be communicating with each other? And so I think that's a big opportunity.
Awesome. Peter, thank you so much. We know you appreciate you kind of giving your insight on that. We know you're super busy, so you can go ahead and take off if you want. Because Peter, Seeing, and Blake actually already went through this, they're going to join us for week 3, which is we're going to go through all our bios and stuff. So see you, Peter. So can we actually turn that up? I'd love to. I'm a little deaf, so if we can get that up as high as we can. So let's go ahead and jump in. So there are 3 objectives that we are going to go through in these 3 weeks. Number 1 is understand how we are uniquely wired to contribute to work and life. The second one is understand how to more effectively communicate and collaborate with one another. And the third is to be empowered to achieve our highest and best contributions. When it comes to how we communicate and collaborate with each other, it really comes down to this. All right, and I'm going to have you guys say this with me. All right, ready? It's not better. You guys got to say it's not better.
It's not better.
It's not worse.
It's not worse.
It's just different.
It's just different.
One more time. It's not better.
It's not better.
It's not worse.
It's not worse.
It's just different.
It's just different.
Because when we actually have a collective language to understand each other, you start finding that the things that people thought were character flaws, we saw it through that lens just because they're different than us, actually is just different wiring. And it gives you a different tool set to interact with each other. And you don't have to waste your time like going through all that personal, interpersonal drama and just get right to what makes things efficient and work well. All right, so I'll start off with this story. So me and my wife. So as you can tell, me and my wife are very different. I am a very off-the-charts innovator merchant, and she is a banker innovator. And our difference is probably the best way that I came into contact with these was when we moved in together. So my wife, when she moved in, she's very methodical. So being a banker, number 1, you're very linear, you're very logical, and a big value that you have is the conservation of resources. So for her, when we moved in to our place, she started in one part of the house and just worked her way out, right? So she started in her bedroom, in the closet, and literally spent like 3 days kind of organizing everything and kind of putting everything together. And then probably the thing that demonstrated the most her value system and kind of really what her CVI, how that manifests is in how we did our linen closet, where we had all of our shampoos and all that stuff. So this is the way it looks. And as you can see, it's very linear, very orderly. But what's interesting about this is the order in which they're in. So if you look at, for example, the hand creams over here, she actually puts it in a certain order. She puts the things that she loves most in the back and the things she loves least in the front. Because she's like, we have to get through this stuff. We have to use it. We can't just let it go to waste. So she forces herself to use the things that she likes least before she goes and uses the stuff she loves most. That's my wife. That is not me. So for me, this is what happened with me. All right. So in the apartment that I lived at before we lived together, I had this bookcase that I absolutely loved. I had it all set up the way I wanted it. It was, you walked in and it was kind of right there. It was like a central piece. It was awesome. When we moved into our new place, there wasn't room for it. There just wasn't a spot for it. Like it wouldn't work on any wall and stuff like that. So me, as an innovator, the biggest thing that I want to do is solve a puzzle, right? I see a problem. I want to solve a puzzle. No, jump share. I don't want to do that later. I'll do that now. And so I wanted to use it. I needed to solve a puzzle. So what did I do? I took all of this stuff and I turned it into a table. Because that's just the different way they were wired, and that's just kind of the way how that all came out. So why do we use CVI? The reason that we use CVI because there's a ton of them. Like I'm sure that all of you guys have probably taken some kind of, they're called psychometric assessments. I'm sure, some of you guys have taken a bunch of different ones. The reason that we landed on CVI over other ones is because the CVI specifically measures for drives and not preferences. So for example, if we're gonna, use the core values index versus the Myers-Briggs, how many of you guys have taken Myers-Briggs, right? Myers-Briggs rates for preferences while the core values index rates for drives. So for example, me and Brent, when it comes to the Myers-Briggs, we're the same. We're both ENFPs. We're both extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. But when it comes to our CVI, we are vastly different, right? So he is off the charts. We're both very big merchants, but he's much bigger builder, and builder's actually the weakest one for me. So that actually goes into a lot, and building, as we're going to get into, is all about making, decide and do, acting things, needing to kind of build things from scratch and really kind of put things into existence and moving things forward. This actually, even though we're the same Myers-Briggs, this kind of expressed itself in the fact that, for him, he wanted to start a business. And me, I wanted to go to grad school and write a 70-page thesis, because that's just, even though we're the same by some of our preferences, what we're driven by is different. You guys with me on that one? Yeah. Right, and that's just going to come up more and more in how we unpack this. So one measures for drives, this one measures for drives, the other ones oftentimes measure for preferences. And the cool thing about this is that it lets us kind of weed through a bunch of stuff. This is why we use it in hiring, because people can present a certain way in hiring, but when we actually see this through CVI, you start seeing that no matter how you present yourself, this is actually giving us an insight into your drives, which actually really is going to give us an insight into whether or not you're actually going to be wired for the specific role that you're applying for. All right, so two of the biggest factors that this allows us to have is, number one, knowing ourselves, right? It frees us from striving to be good at things that we are not wired for. Oftentimes we're obsessed with building up our weaknesses, which is important, but it is much more efficient to lean into your strengths and also let you focus on your weaknesses, but lean into your strengths. And this is actually what lets us do that. And secondly, it helps us to know others. It allows us to adjust our approach so we can have maximum influence. When we actually learn the language from a CVI standpoint that someone else says, we can actually communicate in a way and work together in a way that something that otherwise would have taken us like 2 days, we're able to do it in a much more efficient way because we understand each other's language. You guys with me on that one? Cool. All right. So a couple things for us to know before we start diving into what each of these particular things mean. The first one is the fact that each person has a very unique CVI. And anytime that you see so if you take a look at your CVI score, anytime that there is a bigger than a 3% deviation, 3-point deviation between core values, that's called a significant difference. So for example, in this example, this person is a 24 builder and a 19 merchant. What that means is they are significantly more of a builder than they are merchant. There's a big enough difference there to where they're much more stronger in one than the other. So that's the thing. Rather than solely focusing on kind of like the top two in the names, you want to really, really focus on the point distribution and how that kind of plays out in your overall CVI profile. And the other thing is that anytime there's a 3-point or less deviation, people are switching from energies unconsciously. And I use that word energy intentionally in this because the reason this is driven off of or used off of drives is it really focuses on what energizes you. So as we're going to see, if you are living out a day in the sweet spot of your core energies, even though you worked a 12-hour day, at the end of the day, you're good. You're excited. You think about like the dream day that you've had when you were really able to just focus in on things that made you come alive. At the end of the day, even though you've worked 12 hours, you're still great. You're like still very energized and very fulfilled. Versus if you spent 5 hours doing something that was entirely not related to your wiring, I mean, that made you feel like you were like running an emotional marathon. And when there's 3 points or less, you just switch between those energies, seamlessly. Brian's a classic example. He has 3 of his core energies, builder, banker, and innovator, that are within the less 3-point deviation. So once we kind of understand this stuff, unpack it a little bit more, you can, if you relate that to Brian, it's like you can literally go, all right, he just went from being a builder to an innovator to a banker, and just like seamlessly. He didn't even realize he was doing it, and he was able to lean into those things.
As long as I don't have to be a merchant.
Actually, what's your merchant score?
11.
11. All right, yeah, it'll be important to come. That'll come out in a little bit. So that's 2 things to note. It's like if it's larger than 3 points, it's a significant difference. If it's less than 3 points, you're going in between those very unconsciously, subconsciously. The other thing that's important is what we call the CVI ladder. That's what the buckets that these point structures fall into. So for example, it's this. Anything from 26 to 36. So first of all, how many of you guys have something on your sheet that's above a 26? What's up?
It's at 26.
At 26, yeah. So 26 and more is that you're almost always operating in alignment with this core value. This is your default setting, right? This is the factory settings, if you will, for you when it comes to your wiring. Anything from 19 to 25. How many of you guys have something that's 19 to 25? Most people. A lot of folks really have, when they're more evenly distributed, they have most of their stuff falls within that category. These are things that you're ordinarily and regularly operating in line with these core values, and you find it energizing. If you're doing something in this core energy, it still makes you come alive. Like you're still in your sweet spot. All right, 12 to 18. How many of you guys have something that's 12 to 18? Yeah. This is you occasionally and with effort operate in line with these core values. As we'll see later, anyone can function in any 4 of these core values. It's just a matter of how energizing it feels and how much it lines up with how well you're going to do it quickly. It's like, for example, me doing something that is out of alignment in my core values, I can do it, but it's probably going to take me about 3 times as long as someone that this is a very strong core value that they're in. All right, so this is like occasionally with effort, you can operate in this core value, but you can still do it. And if you're 1 to 11, how many of you guys have one that's 1 to 11? All right. Take note of this, because when we talk about that specific core value, you're going to find, hopefully this is the way that it describes to you, is that you almost never operate with these core values and you actually find it demotivating, right? So when you have to live, like for maybe to a degree, Brian, for you for merchant, but actually because that's kind of like right at the top, it might not fully, like who has someone that's like 6 or below? Anyone? I know Jeremy does. Jeremy has a 4 for banker, As you're going to see, when we describe banker, for like if Jeremy had to spend a day solely in banker energy, he'd probably kill himself and others, probably others first, So yeah, so anytime it's like 11 or below, if you're in that energy, you actually find it very, very demotivating. Are you guys with me on that?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so this is me. So as you can see, I'm very, very split. I have kind of like a bipolar personality. So my innovator and merchant are way, way up here, right? And my banker builder are way, way down here. So as you're gonna see, banker builder, very linear, very methodical, very, kind of like A, B, C, D, E, like in line. And builder is needing to make decisions, like being able to be quick, tweak decisions, drive things forward. What does that mean? If you've ever spent any time with me, you know that I can be quite indecisive. And also, like when I talk, if I'm just like thinking out loud, it can feel like I'm scatterbrained all over the place, right? That's because those two things don't work for me very well. But innovator merchant, I'm way up here. I love living at 30,000 feet, and I love solving a puzzle, which is what you're going to see as an innovator. So for example, I remember when I was in grad school, I was overseeing this leadership class. And I developed an entirely new curriculum for leadership class, from top to bottom. It was the way it was structured, what we covered, like all that stuff. And I remember when I presented it, someone asked me, like, how long did it take you to come up with that? I said, well, there's two answers to that. The first answer is half an afternoon. I just sat down, was able to bang it all out and had it all there. The bigger answer is about a month. Because for about a month I was just rolling it over. I'd kind of put it out, but then I'd find something else, and I don't know how to take it all apart, kind of put it back together, and just really kind of have to like work it out in my head in a way that felt like I was just going boom, 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 boom. But finally, when I was able to fully consolidate it, and it came out very quick. It came out very like all done, and it was all there. It happened very quickly, and that's very common. You guys with me on that? Right. So I apologize in advance if you guys suffer as a result of that. So every personal and professional situation has a best core value that, when applied, has the greatest impact. So pursuing alignment. This is actually really important as we start seeing how particular core value like setups work with particular positions. This is important because when an individual is consistently warped away from acting purely in alignment with their core values, there's a couple things that can happen. They're either likely to fail at their job, they can disrupt the team, or they find that they're constantly redesigning the position to like fit within their core values, which again can oftentimes disrupt the team and cause them to fail at their job, or ultimately they'll probably find another job. For example, when I graduated from college, I wanted to make money. So what did I do? I wanted to apply to be in sales. So I went to a company, and I was like, yeah, I'm very personable. I can talk to people. I feel like sometimes when I actually get to talk to people, I can be very persuasive. So of course, I'm going to be in sales. I'm going to make a buttload of money. And of course, because I can talk that way, I flew through the interview and I got hired on the spot. But I hated sales. Absolutely. I did it okay. Because when you force yourself and you're disciplined enough, you just make it work. But I hated it. It was so demotivating for me. Why? Because my builder is tiny, right? And so what would happen is that a builder needs to be making a lot of decisions all the time. So if you talk to someone like whether Charlie or Mason, you ask them how many calls or how many emails did they send out a day? They'd send a ton, right? I would spend all day crafting the perfect email that no one would read. Because I was not a builder. And so as a result of that, something that I thought I wanted to do, I didn't realize that I wasn't good at it because I didn't understand my wiring. So this is actually, again, why we use this in hiring. Because someone, they come through, like for example, when we're hiring for like account managers or anyone that, any role that's gonna have any significance, any role in biz dev, if they have a low builder, I'm like, hey, I don't care how charismatic you are, you're not gonna like this role. So as a gift to you, I'm going to say no to you. Which is why, for example, like as we kind of go into it, what we have found, media buyers is probably the best example of this. People that really, really thrive as media buyers are innovator bankers. That's having those two strong things is absolutely why. Because a banker, they have to be very methodical and linear, and they go through the same process every single day. Right? And they have to be innovators. They have to come up with innovative solutions on the fly, and always having to do that little by little by little, tweak this, tweak that. And that's what makes them successful. So that's what we found. Every time that we're hiring for a media buyer, that's what we look for. You guys with me on that? Yeah. Cool. All right. Understanding your CVI. So we all have the ability to express each one of these core energies, as we mentioned. But our score in each of these quadrants reflect how energizing or exhausting that activity will be for us. So what I want to focus on today is on these inner quadrants here. So like that's going to be like builder, merchant, innovator, and then banker. It's all, the person who came up with this was obviously a golfer because the point total is always going to be 72. It's always based out of 72. So, and everyone has the same distribution. It always adds up to 72. The ones. What's that? Oh, yeah. Scratch golfers are 72. The ones on the outside are what's called your contribution, and that's going to be a combination. So for example, like intuitive 35, that's the combination of builder and merchant, and that really ends up being kind of that combination is what you contribute to the team. So we're going to go over that next week, but just for a frame of reference, that's what that is. All right, so yeah, let's go. This is exciting. All right, and if you open up your thing, you see that first of all you have the kind of the square thing, and then you have kind of the bar chart below it. Oh yeah. So again, this week we're going to focus on this left side. Next week we'll go into the other side. So you'll see two things. You'll see numbers and you'll see percentages. So the numbers is the actual point value for that. So for example, this person was a 25 merchant. And that is translated into a percentage. So that means that out of waking hours, so if 100% means the whole waking hours of the day, this person's perfect day would be spent 55% of the time they would be in innovator energy, 44% of the time they would be in merchant energy, and they would avoid banker energy like the plague, and every once in a while they do builder stuff, right? All right, so if you look at your distribution, that'll give you a sense as you begin to understand what these core energies mean, like what your perfect day would be. And also, if we're gonna bring you to a point here at Strikepoint to have your highest and best, is find a way to make sure that that is the greatest contribution that you have, that within your role you are functioning in those core energies. All right, you guys with me still? Cool. So yeah, so point total and then percentages. So managers, let's go over some fun numbers. So the distribution for managers, if we're talking averages, is if we title everyone, loop everyone together, we're about a 19.6 builder, 18.9 merchant, 19.3 innovator, and about a 14.3 banker. So who do you guys assume is the highest builder out of the managers?
Why don't those equal to 100%?
What's up?
Why
No, they're not supposed to. They're supposed to be 72.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So the scores add up to 72.
I think it's Mason.
Yeah. Good. Oh, you cheat. Did you have the thing? Yes, Mason. Mason is the highest builder at 24. Without answering Bryce, who do you think is the highest point value for merchant?
Jeremy.
Nope, it's actually Brent. Whoa. Brent has a 30 on merchant. How about innovator? Close. It's actually me. You actually come close. You're what, a 28, right? 26, yeah. Yeah, I'm a 29. All right, so banker. Who do you think has the highest banker score?
Brian or
Huh?
Brian?
Oh, it's me.
Nope. Nope. I'll give you a clue. He's not in this room.
Bryce?
Oh, yes. Bryce is at a 23. So how about all of SPM? Who do you think take a wild guess, who has the highest builder score? Might be surprising. It's actually Lauren. Lauren has a builder score of 26. You've already met the highest merchant, that's going to be Brent, and you've already met the highest innovator, which is banker. I forgot, I did that. Yeah. Joey has the highest banker score at 24, and I am at 29 for the highest innovator. Are any of these surprising? No?
Really?
No? Yeah. All right, so where does the management team kind of line up with the SPM as a whole? So you see that roughly, like merchant-wise, we're about the same. Innovator as a whole, like we skew lower than the rest of all of SPM, but there's a little bit of a higher builder as compared to all of SPM, which in a sense makes sense. You have a lot of people that are starting and really needing to move things forward and be drivers in certain stuff, which makes sense that builders make up a lot of management. All right, any questions on that? No? All right, cool. Let's jump in. So builders, when you're thinking builders, the phrase that you want to think of is this: move fast and break things. Right? This is the classic Silicon Valley thing. It's decide and do, move things forward, worry about the consequences later. We are driving this sucker forward. So here's the thing. So a builder is always going to be catalyzed. Their core energy is going to be power, right? And what power means is that it's personal energy applied to make a positive difference. This is the ability to build, the ability to construct something, to bring something into creation. And it's always going to be catalyzed by faith. Faith doesn't mean they pray. What it means is that they have a good sense of self-belief, in the sense of that I know what to do now and I will know what to do next. If you've ever hung out with Jeremy, who is a very high builder, he is very quick in any situation. It's like, I know what to do, right? I know what to do. I know where to go, And that's because that energy is strong in him, if we're going to use Star Wars references. And because of that, what they're going to contribute to the team is action and results. Action and results. There's going to be a lot of things that they do, right? Again, back to why someone like Mason is really, really good at sales, outbound sales, because he needs to bring a lot of results in, needs to do things again and again and again and make things happen. So that's their contribution. It's very much action and results. Conflict strategy, which we're going to go over a little bit more next week, is intimidation. That's when they're backed up against the wall. They will oftentimes result in intimidating. Their learning style, the way that they learn, is decide and do. Let's do it, and then we'll kind of learn from it later. They need to decide and do. So very action-oriented, decide and do. And communication style is very direct and to the point. How many of you guys have ever had a conversation with either Peter, Danielle, or Jeremy, or Brian, right? Do you experience them being very direct and to the point? Guess how high their builder scores are? All of them have builder either as their top or second one of their CVI profile. Why? Because they do a lot of action results. They decide and do. That's the way they move forward, and they're very direct and to the point. And they can also be a little intimidating. So, any questions on that? So one thing I forgot to mention on this is that as you're looking at this, remember how we talked about the CVI ladder, kind of the way that it's distributed? If you are like me, to where you're extremely high in two and extremely low in the other, every single one of them that is your core energy, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly me. And everyone that is not yours, you're like, nope, that's not me. But if you're a little bit more evenly distributed, or if you have point scores that are a little lower, you'll probably say, yeah, that kind of resonates with me, but not entirely. The degree to which this will kind of feel like it's like, a psychic reading your mail is the degree to which your point score is high in compared to that exact core energy. So, any questions on that? So let me see, who is, Brian, you have builder as one of your top two. Does this resonate with you?
Yeah, most everything. I think the one that is the least is I don't know that I feel like my conflict strategy is intimidation by default.
I was gonna say that, right?
But all the other ones,
Yeah.
I think I'm slower to decide than Jeremy, for sure. I also feel though like I don't know if this is a thing or not, Rodrigo, but I feel like because I have three that are relatively close, I will balance whoever I'm around.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm around Jeremy, I'm going to be less decisive than if Jeremy's not there. Which, I don't know if that's a thing or that's...
Actually, it's entirely a thing. Because what you're going to find is that probably you are actually a very high banker, and Jeremy is very low banker. So if I were to guess who has taken responsibility for making, like Jeremy, again, high merchant, high builder, very much, casts the vision, very much goes out and catches the fish and kind of like brings in the big sales. And then Brian is the reason that we haven't gone bankrupt, like that's the yin and the yang, because you offset that energy. You probably lean into very much your banker energy when it comes to the way that you guys relate to each other.
Yep.
But you guys are able to really communicate well, and that's why you guys really work together well, because you have enough overlap in the important stuff that you work seamlessly together, and you actually balance each other out in really good ways. Because he's a really high merchant and merchant's your lowest, so it's almost like a match made in business heaven. So, all right, cool. Achilles' heel. So this is the thing, like the other edge of the sword when it comes to people that are high builders. The first is they can act quickly or abruptly without thinking. All right. Have any of you guys ever experienced a high builder act quickly and abruptly without thinking? Yeah, they just kind of like, all right, we're gonna make a decision, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like the collateral damage from that decision wasn't understood or felt until the decision was made, right? But they can act if they're pushed up against a wall, they can act quickly, abruptly, and oftentimes it has unforeseen consequences. Or they will do many things themselves because it is quicker for them to do it rather than teach someone else. That's the classic thing. Someone who is like a very, very strong builder and probably a very low merchant is it's like if you want something done, you got to do it yourself, right? You raise your hand. Is that?
Yeah, that's me.
Exactly. Yeah. And lastly, it's their abruptness and heads down activities can be interpreted by others as rudeness or arrogance, right? I oftentimes joke around with Jeremy about this, that I can walk into the office and all of a sudden I look at him like, oh, you got game face on. I'm just going to walk away, you know, because that can happen when they're so focused and so driven on something that if you aren't aware of the way that they're wired, it can come across as very rude and very arrogant, you know. But in fact, it's just the way they're wired. So, all right. For those of you, how many guys have builder that's above, like towards like in the 20s? 1, 2. All right, so Jeremy, does this resonate with you? No. He also scores very high in sarcasm, in case you're wondering. Yeah. All right, yeah, I would imagine so. All right, cool. Let's move on. The next one would be merchant. All right, so first of all, how many of you are merchant in your top 2? All right. What's that? Kind of? What is it? What's your
top, and then I have 2 that are tied for my second.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, that counts.
yeah.
We'll take it as that.
Top 4.
Yeah.
The one that I want to, you got the phrase that I want you to think of when it comes to merchant is "Come on, let's go," right? As who knows who John Wooden is? Who's John Wooden? Huh?
So UCLA coach.
Yes. Okay. What was he like? What was he famous for?
The pyramid thing.
Yeah. Okay. What else? Like.
Well, just like all his like inspirational quotes. And everything.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he won, I think, more NCAA championships than almost anyone, you know, like probably anyone. And he was basically able, year after year after year, he would get a new batch of kids and he would turn them into winners. Get a new batch of kids and turn them into winners. And he's famous for saying, says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, you need a team. Right? So these are very much the people, they have a vision, they know where they're going, but they're very good at bringing the best out of people and bringing people with them. Right? So how many of you would be surprised that this is Jeremy's highest one? Right? Yeah, very much the vision guy, very much loves to kind of inspire, bring other people with them. Right, so anyone have merchant as their top one? Okay. All right, Stuart, does this resonate with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
How so? Like, do you have a...
No, just like working and like bringing in, I think, the right resources for the job.
Mhm.
Like whenever I'm doing projects, I always feel like there's someone that could do it better than me, and so I like to piece those things together. And so, yeah, I think it
Yeah.
definitely resonates.
Totally. And also, merchants are probably the people that have the least wiring to work from home because they need other people. Like, this is why, like, Jeremy's like, I want to be around other people. Please, everyone come into the office, because he's a high merchant. He needs that energy around other people. You know, does that resonate with you? Like, I mean, or like, you know, Brent, you're also a high merchant. Like, you know, do you find yourself like you can get kind of in the zone about stuff, but every once in a while you got to go talk to another human? Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about merchants. All right. The core energy, and this is actually something that's kind of like annoying for me about the core values, is like, it's almost like a marketing thing to where it's like they don't have the right words. Like if you actually have to unpack what the word means. So the core energy for merchant is love. The nurturing of core values in oneself and in others. Basically, this is like kind of the nurturing of relationships, right? They're the ones that really bring out the best in others, like John Wooden, you know, talks about, and really are very, very good at preserving that within a community, right? This is why someone like Danielle is a very, very high merchant, and she's been very, very good at training people up, developing them, and bringing out the best in them. There's a reason why pretty much everyone here that's succeeded in this company, that's been here for a while, Danielle has had some significant impact in their development. Right. All right, truth. Very much the way things are. And what that really comes down to is seeing, not even the way things are, but the way things could be, right? They see, when it comes to contribution, is relationships and vision. They're the ones that see at 30,000 feet. They see where we're going. I mean, if you think even the word merchant, these are the people that would establish trade routes, right? They're the ones like, okay, we are here, we want to go there. They're able to kind of inspire people to go to where we're going. So relationships and vision is what they bring to the team. Their conflict strategy is manipulation. You know, like you put them up, they're very relational. This unfortunately, like oftentimes someone who's a pure, merchant can be very passive aggressive, like they can be, It's mainly because like they're so relationally driven is that they want to kind of, anyway, we'll talk about that next week. All right, their learning style is talk and listen, right? So if you've ever, like for example, Brent, if I ever have to like unpack something, and like I just kind of need to talk something out, like Brent's the first guy I go to. Because I know that I can just start talking. He's just going to listen. He's going to kind of hang in there with me because that's a high temperament that he has. Like you have someone like we talked about like the distribution, that's larger than 3. Like Jeremy is a high merchant, but he's also a high builder. Like to a very large degree. So there's sometimes that he can do that, and sometimes it's very much like no, we just got to make a decision. We got to go, move forward. So if you know anyone who is a high merchant, like very much a talk and listen. Is this like, I guess, Brian, like if someone wanted to talk things out all the time, how would that feel to you?
That drives me crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Brent, if people just wanted to talk stuff out to you, how would that be to you?
All about it.
Yeah, all about it, right? Because you drive energy from that, and for you, it's like you can do it. I've seen you do it.
Get to the point.
Exactly.
I can do it.
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing too is with that, their communication style is big stories, void of specific details. They're very much about generalities, right? They want to paint the big picture, and when you ask them for a specific example, this is a classic thing. It's like, I'm a very, very high merchant. Jenny, my wife, is a very low merchant. She's a very high banker. So I'm always talking about something like, I'm telling her something, general idea. She's like, give me an example. I'm like, I don't know the example, but I can just tell you that it happens, because I'm very much about like the stories up here, but oftentimes it's going to be devoid of specific details. So, all right, any questions on that? Anyone else that has a merchant like that, does this resonate with you guys? Cool. All right. Let's go to your Achilles heel. This is the other side of the coin. So they desire consensus as a requirement for making decisions for the group. They believe that without everyone's input, bad decisions will be made. Again, this is someone oftentimes that has a high merchant that isn't offset by something else. They need everyone's input, right? Oftentimes, like a decision needs to be made. If they are like a high merchant and a very low builder, these are the worst people to decide where you're going to go for dinner, right? Because they want to find out, okay, what do you want? Oh no, what do you want? What do you want? Okay, no, but they want that. They have this peanut allergy, so we got to, rather than someone who's like a high builder and a low merchant, they're like, we're going to, PF Chang's, because they want to grab consensus, and that can oftentimes be debilitating because the decision just needs to be made. All right, there's a need to be liked or pleased by others. All right, I would ask whether or not this resonates with people that would probably make them insecure. Like, okay, this is I can say this is a very much exactly right.
100%.
Yeah. And lastly, their desire connections with people, and thus can have difficulty with rejection. They can take things very personally when things aren't personal, right? Because they're so relationally driven that anything that's said that sometimes this is just the way things are. Like their primary lens, especially if they're a very high merchant, the primary lens, unfortunately, that they see things through is personal. All right. Any thoughts or questions on that? No. Cool. Bobby, how you doing? Where are you at, by the way?
In the office.
I'm at Strikepoint. No, I'm at the hotel. I went to LA,
Oh, nice. Okay.
so yeah.
Cool. Well, we're glad that you can be here.
Yep. I'm glad to be here, man. This is really informative, man. I'm loving every bit of it. So.
Oh, cool. And tell everyone so that people that are just getting to know you, what is your top 2?
So I am tied with Banker and Innovator at 23 each, and then I think I'm a 19 for Merchant.
I think you meant builder, because you're builder innovator.
Oh, yes, I said.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. You're right. Builder, Innovator, tied at 23, and then Merchant at 19 or 17.
Yeah.
So that's right.
He's actually very similar to Mason. Their builder innovator is very similar, except they're opposite. Mason is a higher merchant, and he's a higher banker. Interestingly enough, like builder innovators are very often entrepreneurs. So, have you ever started anything?
No, that's right. A lot of it.
All right, innovators. When you think of innovators, this is a phrase you got to think of. There's got to be a better way. These are the people that are obsessed with building a better mousetrap, right? People that are very, very, very high innovators, oftentimes the only gear, the primary gear they see things through is everything is a puzzle that needs to be solved, even if a puzzle isn't there, right? A classic example of this is that I put together a presentation for something that we were doing for the 2022 kickoff, and Jeremy had given me some input about it. And because I'm such a high innovator, unfortunately, the primary thing that I wanted to do is because he gave me new input, I'm like, shit, I gotta just blow the whole thing up and start it all over again, rather than just kind of making small tweaks, because that's just the way that I oftentimes see things, Another thing, for example, he won't mind me sharing this because we've talked about this openly, but Itai. So Itai is a copywriter, and I remember there was a time when there was some stuff that was coming up between Danielle and Itai, to where it kept being the thing of where they would give Itai parameters on the copy, and Itai would always come back and be like, oh, what about this? We can do this angle, we can do that angle, and it's like Danielle was always like, dude, just do what we told you to do, But seeing it through this lens, because Itai is such a high banker, he had to realize that one of his weaknesses is to always see things as a puzzle needing to be solved, even though there isn't a puzzle there to be solved, right? So once we were able to understand that, he's like, oh, okay. Like when I'm given something, I know my first instinct is going to be, oh, I want to recreate the whole thing. Well, maybe I shouldn't. I'll just put that aside and I'll just take what's the input that's given me, and we'll work it from there. All right. So for them, the highest thing is wisdom, to see things that are and know what to do about it. Again, these are people that they want to solve the puzzle. They want to take what's there and make it better. And compassion is actually another big thing that they have, to remain inquisitive and observant, seeing and understanding. These are people that are very, very good at imagining in their head and putting themselves in someone else's shoes, and being able to understand kind of what they would want, right? Which again, why do you think this would be very, very important for someone who's a media buyer? What's a very, very important thing that media buyers need to do for anything? What's that?
Figure out what the customer wants.
Yes, right? They need to find out who their target audience is. They need to be able to put themselves in the shoe of the other person and see, okay, this would be exactly for this person who we're trying to target, because that's what makes them, and they're able to do that very methodically, and linearly, in a linear fashion. That's what makes them really good. All right, their contribution is always going to be assessment and solution. They're very, very good at seeing what's there and just coming up with an idea for it. They're idea people. Their conflict strategy is very much going to be interrogating. Like one of the biggest fears they have is being seen as dumb, and so oftentimes they will try to outsmart someone else. Their learning style is very much assess and solve. Like that's just kind of the world that they live in. And their communication oftentimes is thoughtful and informative. This is why if you've ever had a conversation with me for longer than 10 minutes, the phrase you'll probably hear from me at some point is fun fact. Like, and this is why I love like being part of like a quiz nights or pub quiz or whatever, because like I will remember, I will not be able to tell you what I ate for lunch yesterday, but I will be able to tell you like the day that George Washington died. Just because I remember stupid facts that mean nothing except you're like in a quiz. So that's what you'll find people that are innovators. So I think you're a high innovator, right? Yeah. Does this resonate with you?
Yeah, the compassion one actually a lot, because that's like one of the favorite parts of my job is like when I'm writing a script, trying to put myself in their shoes and figure out what's like really driving them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I like the most. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. Anyone else that's a high innovator? Ways in which this feels like it relates to them?
Yeah.
Just yes?
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. Cool. So if there's no more questions on that, we can jump on here. So the Achilles heel for an innovator. They can have difficulty implementing because they want things to be perfect, right? These are the people that, remember we had Tesla on there? Like he's the one that was there. Like you find that oftentimes these are the people that they're not very good at minimum viable products. They're solely people that because they want things to be perfect. So they're about to put something out there. No, we got to perfect it. No, we got to do it. We got to change one more thing, tweak one more thing, when it should have just been done. And good enough is never good enough for these people. If that's a weakness for someone that's a very, very high innovator. Right? So as a result, they can tend to continue perfecting more than it's necessary. These are the people that are constantly going back and rewarding things. Thus, the fact that I put something together, Jeremy gives me 1 point, and I'm like, shit, I got to rework the whole thing because I need it to be perfect, rather than just good enough. And they can seem diffused and focused because you're constantly solving new problems. These people suffer from shiny object syndrome, right? Bobby, I think me and you talked about it. Does that resonate with you at all?
I think so, yeah, exactly. Lots. Yeah, could you restate the question?
Oh, no.
I was reading the slides and then I didn't quite listen to what you said, but I was agreeing with as I was reading it.
Yeah, the idea of having like a shiny object syndrome because you're constantly like, you solve one problem, you just want to be on to the next one. That can seem like you can have lack focus sometimes.
Oh, that's 100%. That's 100%.
Yeah. It's probably why you're like a serial entrepreneur and just want to keep building things.
Yeah, I like to build and then elevate, delegate, and move on to the next thing. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Any other questions on that? Any other thoughts? All right. Banker. When you think about bankers, it's just follow these instructions and use this spreadsheet, right? Because they're very much about that methodical. Anyone know who this guy is? Jerome Powell. Who do you know what does Jerome Powell do? Fed Reserve, yeah, chairman of the Fed. Oftentimes what you'll find, people that are very, very strong bankers, especially if they're strong bankers and small builders, they're very, very risk averse. So people can be telling him like, hey, dude, we gotta do something. We gotta hike up interest rates or we gotta lower interest rates. And it's like, for them, it's like very much like, no, I just need more data. I need to really think through how this is gonna impact things in the end. And very much about the conservation of resources, right? So when you think about them, oftentimes just follow these instructions and use this spreadsheet, which is why media buyers oftentimes are very high bankers. So for them, they are very catalyzed by knowledge, the how and why of things. This is why people that are high builders you look at those teams that have high bankers. I always get those mistaken. People that are high bankers, if you look at their teamwork spaces, parts in teamwork spaces, very built out, very methodical. How many of you guys wonder, did you guys think Natalie? Who knew Natalie? Do you guys think Natalie was a high banker? Absolutely. Yeah, she was off the charts banker because she just needed to have everything methodical. A very big difference between someone that's why PMs oftentimes are very good bankers, not just because they can move things forward, but oftentimes when something is done, it needs to be templatized and it needs to be kind of like you need to have the post-mortem stuff so you know how to do it the next time. So that's why we need high bankers or else we're going to be constantly reinventing the wheel, right? Justice, knowledge is available to all and used appropriately. They're very much about equity, Like I remember there's times, you're a high banker, there's times where like I've wanted to use certain language to roll out to the company and you've been very much like, no, I don't want to use that language because I really want to be able to know that we can actually fulfill on that promise. Like I just want to make sure that we can actually live up to that, we have the money in the bank to actually do that, Like I'm sure there's plenty of times where Jeremy's come up with an idea and for you is like, your first thought is like, do we have the money to do that? Or like where does that leave our bank account, Back to the whole thing, their contribution is conservation and information. Back to why people that are PMs, people that need to be very, very high in instituting processes and that methodical, nature of it, oftentimes are high bankers. Their conflict strategies, they can be very aloof. They can be very like, if you're not going to listen to me, fine, whatever. I'm really bad at this. Did you say that, Mason? You're really bad at that?
Yeah.
What specifically are you referring to that you're bad at?
Like the project management stuff.
Yeah. What's your banker score?
12.
12? What's your builder score?
24.
Exactly. Yeah. You just want to decide and do it. It's like, screw it. I don't care. Let's just make it happen. Which is, again, why learning style is read and analyze. My wife is a classic example of this. So we will be in conversations. And for me, my banker's 4. And my banker's is 9, so it's tiny, So which means that because I'm a high merchant, high innovator, very low banker, you can put me in any conversation and I'll probably talk, because I'll just be thinking kind of trying to find a way to weave my way in there. My wife will be in conversations and will say nothing. And afterward, I'm like, hey, why didn't you say anything? It's like, I don't think that I knew enough about the topic to be able to speak authoritatively. I'm like, that doesn't matter. You can just ask a question. You don't need to know everything about it. You don't need to have a footnoted conversation, But for her, she needs to really feel that she can read, analyze. She's very much kind of a classic thing that's always when we have a conversation is she'll say, give me a second, let me think about that. Let me kind of do some reading about that. And because they need to have that. Brian, you're a high banker. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I am probably notoriously slow to speak and join a conversation. I think I prefer to listen, assess, and then figure out a strategy, a plan, and make sure what I say is backed by substance and fact.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, communication, very detail-oriented and very linear in presentation. This is why Bryce is a very high banker. This is why he is like the ninja with spreadsheets, right? Because it's very detailed, very organized. Same thing with Peter. Peter's a very high banker as well. Very, very organized, very, very linear in the way that they approach things. Right?
Jeremy made me project manage for my first 3 months of Strikepoint. And it was bad.
Me too. When I oh, Bryce is talking. It says, but I don't hear his voice.
No, I wasn't going to contribute. I'm being a banker right now.
What did he say?
I wasn't going to contribute. I'm being a banker right now.
Very true. I remember when I was first starting at Strikepoint, I had to do some project management stuff, and the thing that I would always, it was probably the reason why I'm I'm going to kill myself or bankrupt the company if I'm still doing this, is because I would be given a task list, and rather than doing the task list, the only place my mind would go is just okay, how can we tweak this task list? How can we do it differently? So I spent all my time perfecting the task list rather than actually doing the task list. That's why I'm not a project manager. But I know it enough to be able to hire for project managers. So, all right. So talking about Achilles' heels on these folks, they can have a tendency to remain cautious and take no risks. This is my wife again. My wife was in the process of needing to change jobs for a lot of reasons. It took her a year and a half from the time that she's I need to change, I need to have a different job, to the point to where she actually got a different job. She's very, very risk averse. Very linear and focus and direction. Very much that methodical, goes back to my wife, starting in one end of the house and working her way to the other. And this can cause them to not be very agile. For me, I will change on a dime, right? We're living here. The next day, we're hey, we're moving to Morocco. I'm great, cool, let's go. My wife, no. Very, very risk averse. Someone who's a very, very high, especially if they're a very high banker, but also very low builder, they're going to be very, very risk averse. And all right, they can exhibit reticence to jump into unknown projects if they have a lack of knowledge about the topic. Back again to my wife, just please don't tell her I keep using as an example. She is, seriously, she is the yin to my yang. She absolutely makes. She's. Anyway, yes. All right. So anyone that is a banker, does this resonate with you?
Yes.
But I would imagine to a degree, though, because it's because you're a strong builder as well. I don't know.
It actually it resonates in little pockets, honestly, because I feel the three that I builder, innovator, or stronger. Banker is close, but I don't love the banker energy as much. So
I feel like it throttles for me.
What's that?
Keep going.
No.
I just feel like it throttles a lot. I kind of resonate with what you said there, because it depends on who I'm with. I think I throttle between different.
What is your merchant score?
23, I think.
23. Yeah.
23 on innovator, and then.
So depending on who you're with, you can adapt to. You're very relational. You can adapt to other people's energy. Yeah. So there you go.
Now, would you say that a banker is someone who standardizes a lot of your processes, your procedures? Is that something that they thrive in?
Yeah. Yeah, especially if they're very high. Yes, someone that's going to be in that part of it needs to have. You have people that, for example, are high enough in their banker that they can do that, but they probably don't want to do that all the time. But yeah, oftentimes, again, back to the whole chairman of the Fed, they're the ones that have to create the policies that are have footnotes upon footnotes upon footnotes, right? Because they need to absolutely have everything thought out versus someone who's like the president that just let's just make a damn decision,
Right.
This is why it's been important for us to bring on more bankers, and this is why Peter, we've worked with him, it's he told me, he's like, we need more Chris's, right? Chris Jensen. We need more Chris's and we need more Joey's. Guess what their top two, CVI's profiles are? Innovator banker, So to recap, if you have communication styles, the builder's going to be very direct and to the point. Merchants are going to be everything they're going to talk about is in stories, void of specific details. Innovators are going to be very thoughtful and informative. And bankers are going to be very detail-oriented and linear in presentation. Learning styles, builders are always going to want to decide and do. Merchants are always going to want to talk and listen. Innovators assess and solve, and bankers are going to read and analyze. Conflict strategies we'll go over next week. And their contribution, there's action and results because we have high builders, right? Merchants, they're the ones that have high relationships and vision. Again, that's why we have a lot of our managers that are also pretty high builders, high merchants, because they need to bring out the best in others. Innovators are always going to assess and bring solutions, and bankers are going to have their contributions always going to be conservation and information. I think that's a good point to stop for today, but I would love to take a moment. Any insights, any thoughts, as you look back over this stuff, and any reflections on what we've kind of covered today?
Really good. I gotta run.
Okay.
Do we get access to this?
Yeah. I'll give it to you guys.
Good.
Cool.
Super good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the presentation, man. I think you knocked it out of the park. It's so funny, man, because I'm a builder and innovator, and all those Achilles heels really resonate with me. And so I'm finding myself kind of leaning in more towards I feel like I'm slowly becoming more of a banker, right? Just to kind of balance me out because it's trying to resolve a lot of stuff I have as a builder.
Yeah.
Later. So yeah, I definitely see a huge need for bankers, man. They're super important to the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also speaks to why Catherine was such an important person in your kind of working relationship. She's a high merchant, and that's kind of one of your lowest ones,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, guys, thank you for being a part of this. Next week, same bat place, same bat channel. Thank you, guys.